There is a scene in Tom Hooper's The King's Speech in which the British royal family are watching a speech given by Adolf Hitler. A young Princess Elizabeth asks her dad, King George VI, "What's he saying, Papa?" "I don't know," King George replies, "but he seems to be saying it rather well." It's a subtle moment in the film that reminds of the power of political speech. In order to rise to power in politics, one has to either be a great orator or say things that will really capture the attention of the media and the populace. Alexander Payne's 1999 film Election is a biting political satire that filters the many facets of political campaigning through an American high school. The key scene that we're going to analyse is the one in which the three main candidates for president of the student body give their address to the students, aka the electorate. The film's central character is Tracy Flick, played by Reese Witherspoon, a career politician who seems set on becoming president. Clearly modelled on Hilary Clinton, yet made 15 years before Clinton's own ill-fated attempt to become president, Flick believes that becoming president of the student body will be another stepping stone on her career to the top. The scene actually opens with a speech from Jerry, who is running for the role of vice president. Mr. McAllister, played by Matthew Broderick, then informs us that Jerry is running unopposed, therefore he's guaranteed to be elected. So what's the point in him giving a political speech at all if he's going to get the job? The charade of speeches and meaninglessness of the role of vice president is emphasised here. The next speech is then delivered by Tracy Flick, who has the sort of delivery one might expect from a well-rehearsed politician. She speaks of making things better, something that surely any politician wanting to be elected would want to achieve. Flick then speaks of the struggles of students to whom she has spoken, individuals we know to whom she cannot relate. However, these are still people that she needs to win over in order to get their vote, much in the same way that a multimillionaire, well-educated politician needs to try and win over the working classes. What happens next is fascinating. Tracy is heckled by her fellow students before the principal steps in to say, "If you can't be adults and give these candidates the courtesy they deserve, then you don't deserve to be called adults, but children, because that is what children are, and you'll be treated like children." It's not an unreasonable request, but let's remember, this is politics. Think of the State of the Union address, think of political rallies, think of the Prime Minister's questions in the UK, where heckling, jeering and mock laughter are all commonplace. And yet these children are being asked not to do it. Why are they being held to a higher moral standard than actual elected politicians? It's almost like we regress in our moral expectations the older we get, especially in an arena like politics. Tracy then concludes her message, pretending to be one of the people. Her delivery and speech are well executed and professional. It's fairly vague, but it's well rehearsed. This is then followed by Chris Klein giving his speech as Paul Metzler. The proverbial jock, he gets a raucous reception. He is hugely well loved throughout the school, and this is the main reason that Mr. McAllister has picked him to run against Tracy Flick. Yet when Paul comes to deliver his speech, he makes a real meal of things. There's no enunciation, there's no dramatisation, he doesn't look at the crowd, and he's clearly reading it and never pauses at the end of sentences. He then smiles and looks up at the crowd, expecting them to applaud, but gets a very muted response. What Paul Metzler says is not too dissimilar from what Tracy Flick says, yet the speech has clearly been written for him. Paul is not a great orator. He's a figurehead trying to be something he's not, and this clearly disengages the previously eager crowd. Presentation is so key in politics, and Paul clearly cannot present himself well in this environment. And then we get Paul's sister Tammy, played by Jessica Campbell, who is only running for president to get revenge on her ex-girlfriend who left her for Paul. In American politics, there is the two-party system, the Republicans and the Democrats. A third party can run, but stands little to no chance of winning. However, it can cause disruption, and this is Tammy's intention. She then stands up to a few jeers before flooring absolutely everyone with her opening line. Who cares about this stupid election? These days, people can easily get tired of politics, hearing the same promises about things getting better from both sides of the supposedly different political spectrum. Tammy taps into something that perhaps all the students watching on in the hall are thinking. It ultimately doesn't make any difference who we vote for. It's just one big popularity contest at the end of the day. The other two candidates, Paul and Tracy, may be running against one another, but they broadly said the same thing about trying to improve things and making things better. In this context, they're all the same. They just really want something good to put on their college application. In the real world, the vast majority of UK Prime Ministers have been rich white men educated at Eton and Oxford, all largely cut from the same cloth. In 1988, George H.W. Bush was elected. That was then followed by 2 terms of Bill Clinton, which was then followed by 2 terms of George W. Bush. This means that had Hillary Clinton been elected in 2016, between 1988 and 2020, a period of 32 years, there would have been 5 presidents, and 4 of them would have come from the same 2 families. Donald Trump, however, tapped into this. He claimed there was a ruling establishment running America, and that he was genuinely a different option. He built much of his campaign around this in 2016. Tammy then goes on to say that if elected, she will immediately dismantle the Student Council. This is interesting for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's the only actual policy we've heard. For all their talk of making things better or the school reaching its true potential, neither Tracy nor Paul has actually said what they're going to do. They just give the same, as Tammy says, pathetic promises. This manages to expose much of the emptiness of a lot of political speeches, for while Tracy might have said what she said pretty well, as we mentioned, it was pretty vague. Secondly, Tammy creates political anarchy and whips up the crowd to the point where they chant her name. What she said may well be outlandish and controversial, but it got people to listen right from her opening statement. Again, we think of modern day politics, the like of Trump and Bolsonaro, who often say outlandish and controversial things, but it would get people talking about them, both their opposers and their supporters. It would create news articles and get them trending on social media, all the while creating publicity for their campaigns. The old cliches about there being no such thing as bad publicity and the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about ring true here. The reactions from the teachers and the other candidates is one of surprise. The establishment, playing by the same rules that they've always played by, are suddenly faced with a maverick, someone who is outlandish and controversial, and far from being worried about upsetting other people, is actually happy to do so. It's always easy to dismiss such individuals, but their ideas do have support, and, as happens at the end of this scene, their supporters can become vocal and passionate. When it was first released, Election didn't do too well commercially, although it did pick up an Oscar nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. Since then, it's picked up something of a more significant following. Alexander Payne claimed that Barack Obama told him it was his favourite political film, and this is all down to its many astute political observations. This particular scene is brilliantly astute about the power of political speech, but also shows us what can happen when a traditionally dull topic like politics gets turned into something more reality show than lecture hall. If you've seen Election, do let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and do check out our other videos, including Anatomy of a Scene on Fargo, Halloween, The Wicker Man and Home Alone, as well as our other videos on the Outward Film Network YouTube channel.